We're on Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, and the Gemaras today are talking all about how to commit a good murder. In other words, right, great topic for right after Yom Kippur, right? You got clean, so if you want to commit murder, it's the first sin of the year. There are ways to commit murder in which that you'll be patur midinei adam, but Hashem will take it out. In other words, you'll be chayiv b'dinei shamayim, but patur midinei adam. So that's really the topic of the Mishnah, because the Mishnah was talking about who gets death by cherev, death by the sword. Person who commits murder. So now we go into different permutations in our Gemaras about when you've done a direct action that causes murder, that causes death, or when you've done an indirect action for which you cannot be held liable midinei adam in an earthly court. So we're up to the seventh line. Amar Rav, Kafto umeis bara'av patu. That if you restrain someone, you tie them up, and you leave them in a place which is very comfortable. There's only one problem: there's no food. So the person starves to death. So that's a very gradual process. When you put him in that place, he had all the comforts that he needed except for one thing, which would only gradually cause his death. And therefore you're going to be patur from the death penalty. Va'amar Rava kafto b'chama umeis, b'tzina umeis chayav. But Rava then says, but if you tie someone up and you put them directly into the hot sun, or directly expose them to the cold elements, you leave them in the middle of January in the street in Toronto, so then, and the person dies from exposure, so then you're chayiv, because when you put them into that element already had the ingredients to kill them. It's not as direct, it's more direct than putting someone in a comfortable environment and letting them starve. Okay, so you see the element of heat or cold is already beating down upon them when you tie them up and put them there. But sof chamalavo, sof tzinalavo patur. But let's say when you put them in that place, the heat has not yet come. Like you leave them in the Sahara in the middle of the night. So it's cool. And then, but you leave them there and you drive off. And then the sun comes up the next morning. Or, let's say a day like this, you put them in the middle of the afternoon, tie them up and leave them on the street. And only then at night it dips down into the, below zero temperatures. And then they die. So because when you put them in that place, the elements were not beating down upon them at that moment, so then you're going to be patur. As you'll see, what I think about when I think about all of these Gemaras, you remember the old Batman show, where the Riddler would put Batman into one of these traps, and, the saw would eventually, or the pendulum would eventually come and kill them. So the question is that a direct misa or is that indirect misa?
That was the next show. You have to wait.
Same bad time, same bad channel, right? You have to wait and find out. But they always manage to get out. So that's the question: is that would they be chayiv b'dinei adam because maybe they always knew that Batman would wriggle free? Okay, va'amar Rava. So Rava then says, kafto lifnei ari pater lifnei yitushin chayiv. If you tie someone, thank you so much. If you tie someone up in front of a lion and you leave them there, so then you're going to be patur. But if you tie them up in front of a swarm of mosquitoes and the person dies, you're going to be chayiv. So what's the difference between a lion and mosquitoes? Rashi says that the difference is when you put someone in front of a lion, if the lion is a ferocious lion, it's going to eat the guy whether you tie him up or not. So it's not your action. If he's already there and you just restrain him, you haven't done anything that's going to make him get more eaten than if you hadn't tied him up. So that's the way Rashi learns the Gemara. You have to say that we're talking about a case that he was already in front of the lion and you just stopped him from running. But it wouldn't have worked anyway. And that's why you're patur. Someone told me this morning from the Yad Ramah, it was another Rishon, that they learn it differently, that it's not dependent upon my action. Sometimes the lion's just not hungry, and he won't eat the person. So therefore, if the lion goes ahead and eats the person, it's not my fault, because who's to say that the lion was hungry? So that's another way of looking at it. But we'll learn like Rashi for now. However, if you put a person in front of mosquitoes, he says you're going to be chayiv because that's putting him into a dangerous element, and you restrain him so he can't run away and he can't swat the mosquitoes, and eventually he's going to die. But the danger or the hazard starts immediately when you restrain him. Well, Daniel begov right? Yeah. But there the Romans starved the lions. That was the whole point. The whole point was that they starved the lions because otherwise they knew the lions wouldn't eat the person. Okay. Rav Ashi Omar afilu lifnei yitushanami potter hani azli v'hani asu. But Rav Ashi disagrees and he says, no, mosquitoes also you're going to be potter. He says, I grant you that you put a person right in front of a swarm of mosquitoes, they're going to start biting him immediately. But a mosquito drinks a little bit of blood, and then he flies away and eventually dies. The next mosquito, and the next mosquito, it's all new mosquitoes that come every few seconds. So the last drink of blood from the final mosquito was not there at the time when you restrained him. So therefore he's patur, because the only time he's chayiv is if the element that's going to kill him is present at the time when you restrain him. And that last mosquito was not there. Okay, Itmar. Kafa alav gigis, upara alav ma'azeva. Two cases. One sounds very familiar because we know from the Gemara in Shabbos, Kafa aleim har kigigis, that God lifted the mountain over them like a bucket. So what if you take a bucket and you invert it over a person's head and you restrain it there? Now, eventually the person will die of asphyxiation because he won't have enough air, and he'll suffocate on his own carbon dioxide. Or let's say a person is sleeping, and while he's sleeping, you lift off the sun, the skylight, and you allow the elements to come in, and he freezes to death. So in both of those cases, Rava v'Rebbi Zera chad omer chayiv v'chad omer pater. So you have a machlokas between Rava and Rebbi Zera. One says chayiv and one says pater. Tistayim de Rava hu de omer pater. Rava should be the one who says you're pater. De omer Rava kafta umeis barav pater. Because remember, what did Rava say? That if you tie someone up and then they die by starvation gradually, you're pater. So here too, the argument would be that in both of these cases, what you've done is you've put someone in an environment where right now they don't have the elements to kill them, but eventually the guy will suffocate or the guy will freeze from exposure. But at the moment you lift it off the skylight, it could still be 70 degrees inside his bedroom. It's just that eventually it's going to freeze. But the Gemara says, but wait a minute, Adarabba, Tistayim de Rebbi Zera hu de Omar Pater, de Omar Rebbi Zera Hayman da'ile lechavri bevesa de shisha ba'adlik leishragu meis chayev. But maybe Rebbi Zera should be the one who says you're Pater, because Rebbi Zera was quoted as saying that if you lock someone in a marble house, now what we're talking about, really a marble room, what we're talking about is it's a room that has no windows, no air circulating. Eventually the person will die of suffocation. But Rabbi Zera says the only reason you're chayiv is because before you lock him in, you light a candle. And the candle is actively taking away the oxygen. It sounds like, according to Rabbi Zera, if you just lock him in a room without lighting the candle, you're going to be pater. So it sounds like over here too, you put him in a bucket over his head, Rabbi Zera would say you're pater also, because you're not actively doing something that's taking away his air. So the Gemara says, "Taima da adlik leishraga lo adlik leishraga lo." That's what I just spoke out. So the Gemara says, "No, Amri Hasam below shraga lo maschil havla b'shaite." But hacha below shraga nami maschil havala b'shaite. So the Gemara says, no. The difference is really where the Zera would hold your chayiv in the case of the inverted bucket and the opening up of the skylight. Why? Because in both of those cases, there's an immediacy to the exposure to the harmful element that's going to kill him. Where over in the case of the marble house, if you don't light the candle, it's still quite comfortable and there's no immediate introduction of hazardous air. It's a much more gradual process. The subtlety is very small, right, between the difference between the two. But when you put a bucket over someone's head, you've immediately created a compromise in the air quality. Whereas, and the same thing, when you open up the skylight, immediately the cold air rushes in. So there, Rabbi Zera would say that you're chayiv, even though technically he could still survive because the rest of the room is still heated, but nevertheless, or he still got plenty of air under the bucket, but there's an immediate compromise of the quality of air. But in the marble room, there's not an immediate compromise of the air. It'll take an hour for him to start feeling a shortness of breath. And therefore, if you don't light the candle to do something active, you're not going to be chayiv. So that's why Rabbi Zera would hold that over here you're chayiv, and Rava would hold that you're patur. Amar Rava, dachvo lebor v'sulam bebor uba acher v'silko va'afilu hu kodam v'silko patur de be'idin deshadye yachol la'alos hu. So Rava tells us a very interesting halacha. I push someone in a pit. But the good news is, it's a non-lethal pit, because there's a ladder in the pit. He could always climb out. So in that situation, I'm clearly patur, because I haven't put him in a situation where he's going to die from. But what happens if someone pulls out the ladder after I push the guy in? So I'm still going to be patur, because at the moment that I did the act of pushing, it was a non-lethal pit. It only became a lethal pit after I did my action. Now, the Rabbi takes it even one step further. He says, what happens if I push him and he falls, but before he has a chance to even hit the ground, I myself pull out the ladder? So again, I'm going to be patur, because the act of pushing was done at a time when the pit was non-lethal.
Don't we have the principle that a pit 10 tefachim deep can kill something?
We didn't say how deep it is. How deep is the pit?
Well, if he needs a ladder to get out, it's got to be deeper than 10 tefachim.
I don't know. Not necessarily. Or, let's say it's very deep, but there are cushions on the bottom. So, eventually he's going to die if he doesn't climb out because of the air. Remember, we said the havla debor is what kills the animal. Right? That was one of the slurs that was offered in Bava Kama. So let's say it's a very soft landing. There's lots of feathers and packing material on the bottom of the board. But the air will kill him if he doesn't get out. So, again, it's dependent upon the act. What is it at the time when I push him in? Can he get out or can he not get out? Well, Amar Rava, Zark bo chetzu tris biyado ba'acher v'natlo v'afilu hu kodam v'natlo pater de be'idin de deshadye be'mitzak piskei gire. Very similar halacha. I shoot an arrow at someone, but the guy that I'm shooting the arrow at is holding a shield. So it's a non-lethal arrow, because it'll bounce off the shield. So after I shoot the arrow, another guy comes along and pulls away the shield. So the arrow kills him. But at the moment that I shot the arrow, it was not a lethal arrow. And so therefore I'm patur. Now, what happens, we'll go even take it one step further. Let's talk about Batman, let's talk about the Flash. A guy shoots an arrow, and he runs quickly and outpaces the arrow and pulls away the shield after he himself shot the arrow. So there too, even though he's clearly caused the death of this person, he'll be patur midinei adam, because at the moment that he shot the arrow, it was a non-lethal arrow. V'amar Rav Zark bo chetz v'samanin biyada ubo acher upizran v'afilu hu kadam upizran patur de be'idin de deshada be'yachol lihisrapos hava. Let's say there's a drug that can cure an arrow shot, an arrow injury, which there is. In other words, you can take some powder that cauterizes the flesh, and it will heal the guy. If that guy's holding that medicine while I shoot him, so I know the arrow's going to go through, but he can just pull out the arrow and put the medicine on, and he'll be okay. I may be chayiv for damages, but the question is, am I a murderer if he ends up not using the medicine? So if he's got the medicine, then I'm not a murderer. Let's say after I shoot the arrow, someone knocks the medicine out of his hand and it scatters all over the place and he can't use it anymore. So I'm still not a murderer, because when I shot the arrow, it was a non-lethal arrow. Furthermore, even if I shoot the arrow and I run really fast and I outpace the arrow and I knock out the medicine from his hands, Also, I'm going to be potter because, again, it's a non-lethal arrow. Amar Rav Ashi hilkach afilu saman b'shuk. Rav Ashi said, well, let's take that one step further. Let's say there's a pharmacy in town that sells that medicine. Even if he's not holding the medicine, but I shoot him, and I know that he can always cure himself with the medicine, so then I'm also going to be potter. Amar le Ravacha Berei. This reminds me of the all those scenes in the movie where I've just put poison and you've just drunk some poison, and I'm the only one who has the antidote, right? So anyway, so Amar le Rav Acha Berei de Rav le Rav Ashi Nizdamu lo Samon Mahu. So now the question is like this: what happens, according to you, Rav Ashi, that if there's a pharmacy that sells the drug, then he's potter? What happens if the guy doesn't take advantage of the pharmacy? In other words, he gets shot, and they say, "We can save your life. Just give us $10. We'll go to the pharmacy and get you $10. It's too expensive," and then he just expires, right? So, is the guy then a murderer or not? Did he commit murder or not? So, because he died. So, Amar lei hare yatsumi beit-din zakai. So Rav Ashi's response is, listen, when the beit din's going to hear the case, the guy can always say, I thought he was going to cure himself with the medicine. And he didn't. So therefore, beit din will find a zuchus, they'll find an exonerating argument in his favor. Now, next case. Rava says, if a person shoots an arrow against a wall and it ricochets off the wall, and it hits a person and kills them, so the person who shot the arrow is going to be chayiv. Now, this is, of course, when we say chayiv over here, we mean if he does it b'mezid, he's going to be chayiv, because we basically tell him, hey, you're green arrow. Don't shoot that arrow off the wall. It'll ricochet and it'll hit the guy, because we know that you're an expert archer. So if you do that, you're going to kill him. He says, I'm going to do it anyway, and he kills him. So then he's chayiv if he does it, because it's directly, even though it ricocheted off the wall, but it's still his inertia that is causing the arrow to fly. So v'tanatuna kigon elu hamisachikin v'kadur shahargu b'mezid ne'eragin v'shogei golin. And we have a brisa that says the same thing. If a person takes a projectile and uses it like the children do when they play ball and they bounce it off the wall, and he throws the projectile and it ricochets off the wall and it kills someone, if he does it b'mezid, he's chayiv misa, and if he does it b'shogeg, he's going to go into a near miklat. So the Gemara says b'shogeg golin pshita. Well, shouldn't that be obvious that if it's direct result of his act, then he should go to a near miklat if an accident happens and it ricochets off the wall? So the Gemara says b'mezid neheragin itzterichlei mahu detema hasra safeku miyemer dahadra kamash malan. So the answer is, the chiddush is not that he goes to a near miklat if he does it b'shogeg. The chiddush is that even if he says it's b'mezid, he will get put to death. The chiddush is like this. You might have thought that, how do we give someone hasra'ah to say that if you do this and you kill him, you're going to be chayiv misa, if after all, it takes so much skill that it's highly doubtful that he'll succeed in being able to ricochet the arrow off the wall and hit the guy and kill him. So because of that, you might think that it's not possible for the edim even to give him proper hasra, to give him proper warning before he does the act, because they're incredulous that he'll be able to even do it. So that you might think that that's not really called hasra because they're not taking it seriously. Kamash malan, that is hasra. That, hey, watch it, man. If you think you're so skilled to get the arrow to ricochet and kill the guy, you're going to be chayiv misa. That's called hasra. That's taken seriously, and therefore the guy can be put to death. Tani Rav Tachlifa bar Ma'arava Kameda Rabbi Avahu Kagon Elu Hamisachikin Bekadur Shahardu Toch Arba Amos Pater Chutz LaArba Amos Chayiv. So there's a whole controversy as to how to learn this Gemara. We're going to learn like one pshat in Rashi and Tosfos, that when Rav Tachlifa says that when you ricochet a ball, let's say a hard ball, a projectile, you ricochet it off a wall and you kill someone, so if the projectile lands and hits the person who's standing within Dalet Amos of the wall, you're going to be chayiv, going to be pater rather. And if it hits them and they're at a distance of 4 amos or more from the wall, they're going to be chayiv. So the words pater and chayev are the subject of controversy. Tosfos learns that it means pater or chayev from going to an ir miklat, because when it comes to doing something b'mezid, it won't make a difference whether the guy is within Dalet Amos of the wall or beyond Dalet Amos of the wall. If the guy is intent on killing him, he's going to be chayiv because he's skilled enough to know how to ricochet it and cause that person's death. What we're talking about is, you see, there's a Gemara in Makkas that says like this. Let's say I have an intention when I take a projectile and throw it, that I'm going to throw it really far. And instead, I throw it a shorter distance and it ends up by accident, like it was a weak throw, it slipped out of my hand and it ended up killing someone who was much closer. So there, the Gemara in Makkah says, that's even less than a regular shogeg. Because a regular shogeg is where the object lands where I wanted it to land and I accidentally killed someone. But if it doesn't even land where I intended it to land and it kills someone, then I don't even go to an ir miklat. And that's what the Gemara is referring to over here, where I intended the object to ricochet much further, because that's when a person throws a projectile against the wall, he wants it to really ricochet and go for a long distance. Accidentally, it ended up ricocheting awry in a wrong way and ended up hitting someone who was very close to the wall. So there, that's what the Gemara is referring to here, is it didn't end up landing in the place where I wanted it to land, and therefore I'm going to be pater for even from going to an ir miklat. So Amarle Ravina l'Ravashi heichi dami. So Ravina just lets to clarify. He says, what are we talking about? Afilu purtanami, lo. He says, why should there be a difference where the victim is standing, whether he's within Dalet Amos or outside of Dalet Amos? It should all depend upon the person's objective of where he wanted the projectile to land. So Amarle Sam Misachikin Bekador Kama de Azli Mine Menach Nicha Le. He says, because normally when people play a game of bouncing things off a wall, they intend it to travel long distances off the wall. No one, like, you're considered a loser if you throw a projectile off the wall and it ends up landing within Dalet Amos off the wall. And that's the reason why we say that we assume that the person never meant for it to land so close to the wall and ended up killing that guy. So the Gemara now says, Lememra Dichiyai Gavna Kochahu. So one second, you mean to say that a ricocheting projectile is considered to be the fellow's direct action and therefore he's chayev? Or a mini, let's raise a contradiction. We're talking here about the preparation of the para aduma elixir, which is a mixture of special water and the ashes of the para aduma. Okay? So let's say a person is preparing that mixture. The Torah says, v'nosan alav, that you have to actually, the mixture of the ash and the water has to be by human inertia. And if it's not by human inertia, and it just happens to combine by itself, it's not a kosher preparation. And therefore,
action, not inertia.
No, inertia. In other words, you'll see what I mean in a minute. Whereas it's coming from the person's koach. The word koach means inertia. Okay, it doesn't mean his maisa. Maisa would be action. Koach means his inertia. It's coming from his direct motion of his body is what causes the motion of the object. So the example that's given where you have a problem in the preparation is, let's say the water is already in the stone container and he's adding the ash. And as he adds the ash, he accidentally pours it in such a way where the ash, instead of landing directly into the water, ends up landing on his hand or on the side of the vessel. And then it spills in afterwards, falls off his hand or falls off the side of the vessel and bounces off and ends up, like a rim shot, ends up into the container after bouncing off the edge. So in that situation, that it's puzzle. So it sounds like a ricocheting projectile is not his own inertia. It's no longer his inertia. So the Gemara says, Hacha b'mayaskinon b'shoses. So the Gemara says, no, there's a difference. There, the reason it's why it's not his inertia is because it's not ricocheting like over here. Here, the projectile is continuing to move because of the initial inertia that was exerted by the murderers. But over here, it lands on the side of the vessel, and because of gravity, it spills in, or it falls off and spills over into the container. So it's not the ricocheting action, but it's just gravity that causes it to fall in, so that it's no longer his inertia. You see the difference between the two? Okay. So that's why I said inertia, Martin.
Well,
okay.
We'll quibble later.
Okay. Toshma. So now let's look at the next brisa. Machat shahaya nusuna ala cheres v'hiza alav safek ala machat hiza safek ala cheres hiza umitza alav haza aso pipasul. A guy wants to take the para aduma elixir and sprinkle it on a needle that became tamei through tumas meis to purify it. But the halacha is, just like the preparation has to be with human inertia, so too the sprinkling has to be through human inertia. So if I sprinkle the water onto the needle, but instead of landing on the needle, I'm not sure. I see the needle is wet now, but I'm not sure if it was directly from my action of flicking the brush with the water on it, or whether perhaps it landed on the stone that is around the needle and then bounced off the stone and landed on the needle. So if you're not sure, says the brisa, so then you have to redo it. You have to do a redo. It's not going to work. So again, why should that be? If ricocheting is still considered human inertia, why should there be a problem? So Amar Rav Chinina bar Yehuda mishmei derav matzah itmar. The word is not mitzah, which would imply ricocheting, but rather matzah, which means that I don't know how the water got on the needle. It could have not ricocheted. It could have just landed on the stone next to the needle, and because it was on a slant, the water rolled off the stone container that the needle was resting on and then got the needle wet. And because I don't know how the water got on, because I wasn't watching, therefore I have to do a redo. That's the whole issue. It's when it is a ricochet, for sure, it's not a problem because that's still human inertia. So Amar Rav Papa, Haiman dekafte lechavre ve'ishkel alei bidka demaya giri didehu umichayev. But hani mili b'koach rishon aval b'koach sheni grama ba'almu. And for this case, I think of another scene in a movie where a guy wants to kill his wife and her adulterer. So he takes them out to the beach in the middle of the night, at the end of the day. But no, the middle of the night where the tide is out, and he buries them in the sand up to their necks, and he just leaves them there so that the water can eventually pull out. When the water comes out, the tide comes back out, or back in, whatever you call that, and will drown them, right?
High tide.
Right, when it comes to high tide, right. So this is a similar case. See, sometimes the chazarai that you watch can actually come back and help you. Right, it's practical. Right. So what's the case over here? A person restrains someone right by the river, and he diverts the current of the river such that it starts to drown the guy. So in other words, bury him up to his neck right by the river. I divert the current, so the current now is flowing right into his face and will eventually drown him. So in that case, I'm chayiv because that's a direct act, because as soon as I divert the current, it's immediately hitting his face and is going to cause his death. However, if I bury him at a distance or restrain him at a distance from the riverbank, so that it's going to take a few seconds or a few minutes for the water to channel over to where he is, so then I'm patur b'dinei adam, once again, because it's indirect. It takes a while for the water to get to him.
The same thing as the Haman and Sinai. You know what's going to
Yeah,
happen.
exactly. Okay. The Amar of Papa, Zarak Sor Lamaila V'holcha Litzdadin V'har G'chayev. A little bit difficult to understand the case, but Rav Papa says, if a person throws a rock straight up into the air, vertically up into the air, and instead of coming right back down, it goes and veers off to the side, so then the halacha, and it kills someone because it veered off to the side, so then I'm going to be chayev, at least chayev, let's say, to go to an ir miklat, if I do it b'shogeg. What's the reason? The idea here is like this. If I threw it straight up and then it came straight down, I wouldn't, and it kills someone, like I step out of the way and my friend's standing right there and it comes and hits him, so then I'll be patur. Why? Because it's not my inertia. There's no inertia of mine involved in that rock anymore because it's gravity that causes it to come down. But if it flies off to the side, then there's got to be some of my inertia still in that rock, because otherwise how did it go off and veer off to the side? So that's what the Gemara is now going to speak out. So Amar le Marba Rav Ashi le Rav Papa, my time in Mishum de Kolchohu. So what's your argument? Because his inertia is still in that rock. So I Kolcho Tezel Le'el. If it's his inertia and he threw it straight up, then it should keep going up. It should only be chayv if it hits someone going up. And the ilav Kolcho Tezel Letochas. And if it's not his inertia, then it should come straight down. And if it comes straight down without his inertia at all, so then he should be putter completely. So the question, so then why is he chayiv in a case where it veers off to the side? Either he should only be chayiv when it's hitting someone on the way up, or he should be completely putter if it comes straight down. How did it go to the side? So ella kachoshu. So you have to conclude that what we're dealing with is a weak inertia force. Weak force, strong force physics. No. Weak inertia. There's weak inertia that's present here. In other words, the idea being is that let's say most of the force that is hitting the victim is through gravity. But the fact that there's a partial vertical trajectory here indicates that some of the inertia that is hitting the victim is coming from the person who threw the rock. Not all of it, clearly, but some of it. And that some is enough to make the person have to go to a near miklat. And this is where we'll hold it for today. Have a wonderful day.